welcome to Bad Marriages in the Bible.
Welcome back, everyone.
I'm Kate.
I'm Sean.
And this is Dandelion Ministries, where we share the grace of Jesus Christ in your place of need through creative means, like this podcast about the bad marriages in the Bible.
Yes.
And God's big redemption. We also host retreats. We use our art, painting and drawing, like that kind of art, and singing,
music.
and songwriting. And so, and we love to create spaces for others to reconnect with that creative part of themselves, and to reconnect with the grace of God.
Right. I mean, that's usually where we're most honest, right? When we are sitting down with some sort of, you kind of can't hide it, right? If you are bad at art, so you're honest in that way. And it makes me think of 50 First Dates, which I know you've all seen, Adam Sandler and what was her name?
Drew Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore, thank you.
Yes.
Anyway, she
has a magazine.
She does art therapy with people who are like memory loss and stuff like that. And one guy's painting, and he was like, oh, he's like really bad short-term memory loss, and he's like, you painted that. She says, you painted that. That's your painting. He's like, oh, I suck. Anyway. But art is where, when we connect with the
inner critic.
The inner critic. But I was going to say we connect with just our defenses get automatically taken down. We're not dealing kind of with rational things. We're we're emoting, where it's like it's all very honest on the canvas or when you sing or play an instrument or whatever. And so it just kind of bypasses our defenses and gets us to where we really live on an emotional level and kind of the stuff that we carry. So we always love to use that because those are the places actually where you need to hear grace. You need to hear Jesus' love for you there. That was my little aside.
Thank you, Sean. It was a good
Kate's
aside.
Looking at me like we should start over. But we're not gonna. Here we go.
No. So we're going to dive back into our story of a sordid marriage between King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And Ahab was the king of the northern kingdom of Israel. After King David and Solomon, Israel was all one country, and then it divided, split in half, and only one tribe with Benjamin actually into it. But Judah was the southern kingdom, and it had the temple and Jerusalem, and then the northern kingdom was all the other 10 tribes. So Ahab was one of the kings there, and he is notorious for being the most, how does it describe him? In 1 Kings 21, 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 25, there was none who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord, like Ahab, whom Jezebel, his wife, incited. He acted very abominably in going after idols, as the Amorites had done, whom the Lord cast out before the people of Israel. So he was
the worst. He was just the worst.
In my big fat Greek wedding, when the wife is like, the husband is the head, but I am the neck.
That's
and
right.
I turn
the
him.
The wife is the neck. That's right.
I turn him where I want him to go. And that was definitely Jezebel. The story, the narrative paints Ahab as sort of a pouty king who cannot solve his own problems. And Jezebel gets things done. And she most famously, he wanted this guy Naboth's vineyard for his own so he could grow veggies or something.
Yeah.
And she
put his pool in there. Who knows?
And Naboth said, no, I won't sell. And then he pouts. And then Jezebel is like, what the heck? Are you king of Israel or not? And so she takes matters into her own hands, gets Naboth killed, takes his land, gives it to Ahab, and is like, here you go. And he's like, oh, thank you. And now he's happy.
Right. Her question was rhetorical because she rules.
Yes, right. That's the truth.
She's like, you don't, I do. And and so she's been running the show behind the scenes.
Bringing with her 500 prophets of Baal and worshiping Baal. They were eating with her every night. And so really leading Israel and Ahab away from God.
Yes.
And you see God's passionate love for his people. He's like, I really love you. I'm not going to give up on you. And you're meant to be with me. And going after these other gods is like futility. They're not going to answer you.
Right,
they're not real.
Yeah.
They're not real. And this mindset is only going to enslave you more and enslave you to people who do not have your best interest in mind. They only have their own best interest in mind.
Jezebel does not care about you.
Yeah.
Israel.
She does not.
Yeah. And
as is seen. So last time we told a story about the prophet. Were you going to say something? I got excited.
No, you get excited, so just keep going.
Right.
This is your show.
My show. I had to do the intro, so we always like.
It's like you're the neck.
Get in your place, Sean. So
break those words. Go ahead.
So
Elijah.
Yes. Because his successor is Elisha, and I will always get the two confused.
Yeah, always mixes those up. So Elijah.
Mm-hmm. He was our story last. He was our featured story last week.
No, that was Elisha last week. See, Elijah's the one that had the showdown with the prophets of Baal.
With the prophets of Baal. That was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, but Elisha was last week with the widow's oil.
With the widow's oil. Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Kate. Keep going.
I don't know anything about the Bible. And we're leading a podcast about it. So, he had delivered this prophecy against Ahab and Jezebel after she had orchestrated Naboth's vineyard and stole it and had him murdered. And Elijah had said, because of this, God is going to bring justice to your house and your dynasty is going to be wiped out. And, Ahab had 70 sons. Quite a number.
Right.
And, there was.
But that's where Ahab actually repented in that moment.
He does.
And he was like feeling really bad and everything like that. And so the Lord said through Elijah that it's not going to happen to you, but it'll happen to your kids.
It'll still happen to your kids. And the dogs are going to lick up your blood.
Yeah.
And that did still happen.
It shows just kind of how, Ahab was not, he was, like you said, he was not concerned about others. He was concerned about himself. So,
yeah.
But it does also show God's mercy in that moment. And, so.
He worked a lot on Ahab. He was very patient and gracious with Ahab.
Yes.
And did a lot of breaking into his life. So, that was, God was very long-suffering and merciful with him. So here we are at the end of the dynasty of Ahab, and the text is showing that God was faithful to that word that he gave through Elijah. And he was faithful. He's solidifying Elijah as like, he really was hearing from me. Look, it's coming true. I do follow through with what I say. And here we are. With Ahab has now died, and his son Joram is reigning in his place, and actually a distant relative of Ahab is the king of Judah. Too, of the southern kingdom. They all share Omri as an ancestor. Omri was Ahab's dad, so these new kings, are together. They had tried to wage war on Syria and failed. And Joram, Ahab's son, comes back nursing his wounds. And Ahaziah, the king of Judah, comes up to visit him. And the stage is set for God to fulfill his prophecy about Ahab and bring justice to Jezebel.
Right. And this has happened. This is now taking place with Elisha, because Elijah, as if you've ever heard Chariots of Fire or seen the movie or anything like that, ever watched National Lampoon's Vacation with Chevy Chase, then you know the song when they're running to Wally World. But that is all a reference to what happens to Elijah, if you don't know it. But he and Elisha go off to the other side of the Jordan, and while they're standing there, a bunch of chariots of fire literally come down from heaven and take Elijah up out of Elisha's sight. So Elijah is one of the guys in the Bible that never dies. He actually just goes to be with God in heaven, rides the chariots of fire away, and Elisha inherits his mantle of authority and becomes the main prophet. And so Elijah never actually gets to see him. This is just a little side note, but he never actually gets to see the word come to pass. He sees Ahab taken down. He sees the Lord. We saw that whole episode where the Lord shows up powerfully and beats Baal and the prophets of Baal, who have nothing, and they're not, Baal's nothing. And God consumes the altar and the sacrifice and all of that. And we see Elijah get very low, and God ministers to him and everything, but we never see him actually.
Yeah, he doesn't get to see it.
He never gets to see Jezebel defeated, because Jezebel continues to seek him out and try to kill him. And so that's just an interesting little aside for all of us who are walking a walk of faith with the Lord. There are times when we don't get to see the word come to pass, but it doesn't mean it doesn't come to pass. We have his promises, and what Elijah does get to see is this dramatic salvation that God comes for him and takes him up in the chariots of fire. And so he does still get to experience the fullness of God's promise, but it's Elisha that will get to actually see, like you said, this word come to pass, and the Lord keep his promises to protect his people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I think we can all relate to. If you've ever prayed for somebody and you didn't get to see the answers, it is the common story for artists usually.
Yeah, right. I painted all these paintings. No one cared while I was alive, and then later, everybody cares.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So here we are in 2 Kings chapter 9, and these, northern king of Israel and the southern king of Judah, they're together, and Elisha tells one of his...
She did it. Woohoo.
Elisha tells one of his prophets to go and anoint the military, one of the heads of the military of, King Ahab, now King Joram's military, to go anoint him as king, to start a coup, to overthrow the house of Ahab. And so
his name is Jehu.
There you go.
Yeah. I was like, she's building towards it. I just didn't know if you were going to say it.
Oh, the commander. Yeah.
Jehu.
Exactly. So the servant goes and does that and finds, the group of military commanders hanging out together, and he selects Jehu and brings him into an inner chamber and anoints him with oil as king, and then reminds him of the prophecy that Elijah said of bringing an end to Ahab's house.
Right.
And then Jehu kind of plays it cool and comes back out, and the servant flees. The servant of Elisha flees, as Elisha told him to do, because he's like, it's going to get hostile and rowdy, and you don't want anything to do with it.
Deliver the word and get out of there.
And so his commanders are like, what did he say to you? And he's like, oh, it was nothing. And they're like, come on, what did he say? And then he says, actually, he anointed me king. And
what?
And then they all kind of celebrate that and get behind him. And then he goes and brings about the end of Ahab's family. So he goes and charges the palace And Jezebel sees him coming, and she gets herself all done up with makeup and her finest clothes. And she goes and watches at the window, and she's ready to face this like kind of head on, with
Probably trying to tempt him to, I'm sure she's just trying to use whatever she's got at her resource, like her resources that time. Like, I'm going to use my beauty. I'm going to try to get this guy to relent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But.
And so she sends out a servant, a messenger to see what his intentions are. And Jehu says to the messenger, "Get behind me." And he keeps advancing. And she sends out another messenger, and he says to that messenger, "Just get behind me."
Right. The messengers are not trying to defend Jezebel. They're like not working hard here.
Yeah, they're
like,
terrified.
What do you want? Oh, cool. I'll just follow you, whatever.
Right. And so then the two kings, Joram and Ahaziah, see Jehu still advancing, and so they go out and confront him on the field, Naboth's field,
on his vineyard,
in that vineyard. And so the stage is set where the sins of Jezebel and Ahab are recalled, what they did to their people, basically. And it's on that place that Jehu ends up striking down both kings, shoots them with bows and arrows. And so both of those kings are dead, and he continues to advance on the palace. And when he gets there, Jezebel kind of confronts him and dares him, and he calls out and says, "Is there anybody, faithful in the palace? Anybody who's going to serve me?" I forget what he says exactly, but is there anybody faithful in there?
Right.
And two eunuchs, slaves of hers, castrated men, poke their heads out of the window, and Jehu calls to them and says, "Throw her down."
He says, "Who's on my side?"
That's what he says.
Who is on my side? Who?
Yeah. So it's not even, he doesn't even use the word faithful. He's a bit bloodthirsty. So he does enact the justice, that Elijah called for, but he is also bringing his own sort of bloodthirstiness to it.
Right. But I interrupted you right at the moment, but that's what happens. Two of her own servants. It says two or three. Two or three. Not sure.
Not quite sure.
Two or three eunuchs looked at him, and Jehu says, "Throw her down." And so they threw her down, and some of her blood splattered on the wall.
There you go.
And on the horses too, and they trampled on her. So that is what happens
disgusting
to Jezebel. It's gruesome.
Not only that, but Jehu then comes in and eats in the palace. So that's gross to think about. And so he's eating in the palace, and then he's like, "We should go clean up the body." And they go out.
Bury her.
They can't find her body because the dogs had eaten her.
Yeah, they found some parts. But it's gruesome. This is what the Bible, it doesn't, like we've said so many times, it is not like this, it's not a fairy tale. It is not a bedtime story. Like, this is true, and this is God actually keeping his word. And it sounds so harsh and all of that, at times to us, except for the fact that this is him, like you said earlier, defending his people and saying, this woman, she was bad. Ahab was bad. They were bad for my people. It's again that fulfillment of the prophecy that Samuel gave way back, saying, you guys want a king, but that's a bad idea because the king's just going to rule over you and it's going to take your stuff and it's going to send your kids off to war and all that kind of stuff. And Ahab and Jezebel were like the height of that negative prophecy. And so God keeps his word and protects his people from this false ruler and all of her false gods. I mean, like, we don't like it on one level. I mean, when God does this in our lives, we don't like it. We've talked about this before, because we feel comfortable with these things, or, even when they become abusive, the idols that we have in our lives, even when it becomes dysfunctional and goes to unhealthy places. It is a miraculous thing when we ever get to the point where we want something else, when we actually say that this is killing me, and it's God who is the one who's doing that work and is actually putting to death the things that are trying to kill us. And that's what Jezebel was. She was just all about her own agenda. And she was still pulling the strings, I'm sure, behind Joram, and was just, she didn't care about any of the people.
No, as evidenced by her own servants, they don't defend her.
Right. They don't defend her. They toss her out the window.
And her own army commanders, like, thrilled at the idea of a coup
Right.
and taking power. They're standing on the vineyard that symbolizes how that would be kind of an example of how she treated her people.
She ruled, yeah.
So it does give hope for those who have been victimized and who are in a very unjust governmental system, that God sees, and he does bring justice. All things are laid bare. And this is also, like you say, him being faithful to his word and to his prophecies. So you can bank on him to keep his word. And then this is like a mini judgment. This is a little mini judgment that is meant to be a wake-up call for the big judgment. And what Jesus did when he came is he took the worst that we can do, and the Jezebel and the Ahab that are, the Old Testament sort of has a trajectory of the understanding of what enemies are. For a while, it's all the enemies out there, actual people, and we have to kill them with swords and bows and arrows. And they're the enemies, and we're God's chosen people. But all throughout, God is actually after their hearts. And that God's chosen people are as sinful as the quote unquote enemies out there. And so the story is always showing that there's the sin inside. Both the Jews and the non-Jews are enemies of God. And he has to intervene and bring things to light, and then have mercy and stay faithful to his promise to stay with his people. And so Jesus, and by the New Testament, Jesus is showing, sin really is that bad in everybody's heart. Everybody is sick with it. He's not in denial at all just because, you descended from Abraham doesn't mean you are better than other people. Everybody is in the same boat of being, having the Jezebel and the Ahab in our hearts.
Yeah.
And that's what he took upon himself on the cross. And that is where God unleashed his full judgment over the wickedness that we do towards each other, towards ourselves, against him. God unleashed his full judgment, and Jesus took it on our behalf so that we could be forgiven. And so these little mini judgments that you see in the Old Testament, and they are like, there's killing and there's wars. That is what Jesus did to our sin on the cross in his own body. He took the full judgment of what it means to forgive somebody, because it hurts to forgive. It's not an easy thing to do, but he brought that upon himself to really forgive us. And then the story doesn't quite end there. We're waiting for him to return again and bring a new heavens and a new earth. And there's going to be a final judgment where all the wrongs will be made right, and we'll all be held account. And we'll either say we're with Jesus, or I don't know that guy. I'm standing on my own 2 feet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for a Christian, that judgment has already happened, which is what you just described. So the end of all things, as Tolkien says through the Lord of the Rings, here we are at the end of all things. Frodo says to Sam. And, but this is going somewhere. The scriptures tell us that. And, we are looking forward to a redeemed creation, or new heavens and a new earth and all that. But But at the end, that is going to be the thing. There will be those who never knew the Lord, that didn't believe and all of that, and that it will be a judgment for them. Everybody who is in Christ that's a Christian, their judgment will have already occurred at the cross. And that is such good news for us. So you don't have to be afraid of that end day. It is going to be, as they say, a great and terrible day. But what you're describing here with Jezebel and Ahab, like that's what happened on the cross, as you just said. It's one of those things where we still want to try to externalize, and we still want to look at Jezebel and be like, wow, she was just terrible. She was just terrible. And as long as I'm not like Jezebel, then I'm doing okay. Or as long, what we love to say now, as long as I'm not like Hitler or Stalin or whoever. If you're a Democrat, it's probably Trump. And if you're a Republican, it's probably Obama or Biden. As long as I'm not like these people. We always love to demonize someone else and say they're the ones that I'm not like. We want to take our righteousness and make it a horizontal issue, always related to people around us and that are on our level. And Jesus doesn't let us do it. The scriptures don't let us do it, as you said. And it's building towards his Sermon on the Mount, which is just, as we've talked about before, it's him laying it all out and saying, we are all guilty in our hearts of sin. We have broken every commandment, every single one. And because we've talked about it before, the way that we actually function as people is not that we're neutral and we're trying to kind of make good decisions and do the right things when we look at the law, and choose the good things to avoid the bad things. That is not how it works. It's actually, the Bible comes to, and Jesus preaches what he preaches about the heart to show us that we're already enemies of God in our sin. We are already actually against him. We want to stand on our own 2 feet, like you said. And what we need is to be saved from that. We need to actually be raised from the dead. And if we don't think we're dead, then we need the thing in us that thinks it's still alive, the old person, the old man and woman, to be killed. And that's what this is foreshadowing. This is as the reformers would say, this is God's alien work when he's putting things to death. But he's still doing it. He is the God over all things, and he puts things to death that are killing us so that he can raise us to new life, so that he can bring something new out of the ashes.
What you really have is a God with a fierce, passionate love for us, who's fighting for you and winning and won.
Yeah, that's right.
He won. But I think that's something that everybody would like to have. Somebody really fighting for you because they love you so much. They're jealous for you. They are not giving up on you. And that's what you see when you see a mini judgment like this, and God throwing out the toxic, the enslaving thing. He's doing that to bring intimacy, closeness with him, where there is true life, true freedom, true peace and justice, and mercy for you.
Yeah.
So that is where this points to Jesus.
Yeah,
So.
we all want. We were just talking about this the other day, laughing about rock and roll, of course, and we were talking about Led Zeppelin and Robert Plant, and how did we even get onto it? It was some song that was it was Freebird. It was Lynyrd Skynyrd and Freebird, and you were talking about how it's just kind of like, oh, I gotta go, I'm a Freebird, and sorry, I'm breaking up with your lady, like can't stay just because
Can't
like,
tie
I'm
me
so
down.
free. Yeah, can't tie me down. And then I was joking about how, for those of you who are Led Zeppelin fans out there, which if you're not,
Right.
you should be. Robert Plant was always he was always dreaming about and writing in his music mostly about being the knight in shining armor to come and rescue and to fight for the damsel. If you ever watched, and you're getting deep into Sean's brain here about my fandom. But when they did Song Remains the Same, which was the genesis of music videos, okay? Just everybody, I Want My MTV, all that, it began with Led Zeppelin. They did a whole movie called The Song Remains the Same. It's terrible. And if you're not on acid while you're watching it, like you're going to be like, this is so dumb, but also amazing. And so, and anyway, don't do drugs. And but Robert Plant, they all do these, each band member has these little dream scenarios of kind of what they love kind of thing. And they're very bizarre. Although I love John Bonham, the drummer, his is just drag racing cars and taking care of cows. I'm like, that man is amazing. And
simple.
God rest his soul. But Robert Plant is one where he is dreaming, and he always writes. He loved Tolkien. He loved the fighting darkness and all of that. And his is he's this beautiful blonde woman in like a tower, and he's going to rescue her. And that is what we all dream about. It's like all of our fairy tales. We all want it. And this is actually what you just said. It's my huge tangent. This is actually what Jesus has done for us. He is that for us. That's why that story resonates. It transcends culture. And because we're actually all desperate for that rescue. We're all desperate for somebody to fight for us, like you said.
Not just women, but men too.
Right, exactly. I am in the tower. I am in the tower. It's like in gosh, I'm just freely associating here. It's like in Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail. And the one guy is up in the tower. He's like the son of a king, and he just wants to sing. And like the king is like, no, none of that. But anyway, he's like being held in the tower, and he wants to be rescued. And he shoots an arrow out the window, asking for rescue, and it hits Lancelot's servant in the chest. He's like, a message for you, sir. It's brilliant. Anyway, go watch that. Watch Song Remains the Same, then watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
And then read 2 Kings chapter 9.
The point of it is that that was a prince in a tower who needed to be rescued, and Lancelot comes in and starts killing everyone, and it's all very funny. And they're like, no, stop. And he's like, oh, sorry, everyone's sorry. But we are all desperate to be rescued. And this is what Scripture is telling us. It is testifying that God has come, God himself, the one that was our enemy, not because he didn't make us his enemy. We sinned against him, but he comes after us and saves us. While we were still enemies, Christ died for us. And he is that knight in shining armor who fights for you. And he wins, as you said. And we all want that. We all want it. I mean, the Killers sing it. I'm going to be her prize fighter, I'm going to fight for you. And it is the story that, like you said, I'm not going to give up on you. It's in so many songs. It's in so many art pieces. It's just what we are emoting because we're all
craving for.
Yeah, we're all scared that no one will, and yet we have a message for you right now that Jesus Christ has fought for you.
That's right,
and that He has come and saved you from your sin. You are forgiven in Christ right now.
Yeah,
that's the truth.
That's
if you're
right.
listening to this, just know that you are forgiven in Jesus Christ for all of it. And that He loves you and He's not going to let go. And that He's actually going to put to death the things that are killing you.
That's right. That's right. And that fear of, if they really found out, then they would leave me, which we've talked about a lot in marriages. If they really found out how selfish or I was, or the evil thoughts I have.
Right. My broken adulterous heart.
Yeah. And here Jesus does know about those things, and He has come for you and loves you and has a love that is stronger than those things. And it's like, I am not in denial about them. I see them plainly, and I am coming to free you from them, and I'm coming to lead you closer to me.
That's right.
And closer to the other people. So you don't have to put on your makeup like Jezebel when you go face the truth with Jesus.
That's right.
Leave that makeup off.
And take the mask off.
Face the truth, because He's not going to condemn you. He's come to save. So quite the opposite of Jehu. Praise God.
Right. Thank God He took it Himself.
Yeah.
He took it Himself.
Well, on that note, thank you for spending the last 34 minutes with us. We hope you have a great day. Check out the show notes for Sean's email. Shoot us any questions or prayer requests. You can give the show a review or share it with your friends on any listening platform. And we invite you also to subscribe if you haven't already, just so that you can stay up to date on our latest Bad Marriage, Big Redemption. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.